You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight you will hear them. The fluorescent tubes above hummed a discordant note, bathing the rest stop washroom in an antiseptic glare that felt less like sanctuary, more like scrutiny. Cold water, sharp against my skin, did little to erode the crust of fatigue accumulated over 12 hours navigating ribbons of asphalt. My reflection surfaced in the mirror as I reached for a brittle paper towel. A stranger swimming in the glass, eyes shadowed by the mileage, by the sleepless vigils kept at the wheel. Those weary eyes were poised, though I couldn't know it then, on the precipice of a vision that would etch itself into the marrow of my memory. My name is Elias. This pilgrimage west was meant to be simple, a baptism into a shared future. Clara and I, bound for the sun-drenched promise of California, had surrendered days to the highway's hypnotic rhythm, a blur of lane lines and lukewarm coffee. Midnight had just bled across the clock face when the weary sign for this rest area emerged from the ink-black desert. Our car ticked itself cool in a near-vacant lot, a scattering of slumbering semi-trucks and one bruised-looking RV, its only companions. Clara had been lost to sleep for the last 100 miles, her silhouette soft against the passenger window. "Hey," I murmured, a feather-light touch on her shoulder. "Taking a breather. Need anything?" She surfaced slowly, blinking against the car's sudden interior brightness, like a night creature startled by dawn. Water, maybe. Something small. I nodded, retrieving my wallet from the console's clutter. Back in a flash. Keep it locked, all right. A drowsy assent slipped from her lips as she sank back towards slumber. A faint smile touched my own. Even travel-worn and creased, adrift in exhaustion, the sight of her settled something deep within me. Outside, the night air was a cool balm against my face, a welcome reprieve from the car's recirculated staleness. I stretched, vertebrae clicking like reluctant tumblers in a lock. The rest stop building stood stark ahead, an island of brittle light adrift in the immense, swallowing darkness of the high desert. As I neared the entrance, a figure detached itself from the shadows by the wall. He leaned there, nursing a cigarette, its ember a fierce orange eye in the gloom. An unnameable current of unease prickled my skin. Perhaps it was the unnerving steadiness of his gaze tracking my approach, or the smile that stretched just a fraction too wide across his face. "Night," he rasped, the sound like stones grinding together. I offered a curt nod, my pace instinctively quickening. In and out. The building's interior sighed with emptiness, fluorescent brightness bouncing off the polished floor. My own footsteps seemed unnaturally loud, echoing in the void as I navigated towards the glowing hum of the vending machines. I procured 2 bottles of water, a handful of snacks, then veered towards the washroom. Which brought me here, confronting my own spectral image, wrestling a formless dread that clung like static. I dried my hands, gathered our meager provisions, a sudden urgency propelling me towards the door, towards Clara, towards the continuation of our journey. But as I pushed the washroom door outward, I almost cannoned into someone. The man from outside. He lurched back, a cascade of mumbled apologies spilling from him. "It's all right," I muttered, attempting to navigate around him. He remained planted, that disquieting smile resurfacing. "Got a long haul?" he inquired, his tone casual, yet somehow probing. I nodded, reluctant to engage, but wary of outright dismissal. "Yeah, California bound." "California," he echoed, rolling the word on his tongue as if testing its weight. "Long way off. Traveling solo." Ice traced a path down my spine. Clara, cocooned in the car, vulnerable. "No," I stated, injecting firmness into my voice. "My girlfriend's waiting. We need to get moving." He raised his hands placatingly, the smile unwavering. Right. Drive careful." I pushed past him, a powerful instinct screaming not to look back. The cool night air struck me again as I exited the building, a sharp inhalation failing to steady the frantic pulse hammering against my ribs. Our car waited where I'd parked it, a familiar anchor in the strange emptiness. Approaching, I could see Clara's outline through the glass, head still canted against the window. I tapped lightly, not wanting to jolt her awake. Nothing. Deeper sleep than I thought. I tried the handle. Locked, just as I'd asked. Good. "Clara," I called, rapping my knuckles more insistently now. "I'm back. Doors." Still, no flicker of movement from within. Unease curdled into something sharper, colder. I knocked again, the sound sharp and brittle against the glass. "Clara, wake up." Silence answered. My heart kicked into a frantic rhythm. I pressed my face close to the window, hands cupped around my eyes, trying to pierce the glare from the overhead sodium lamps. The interior swam into focus. Empty. The seat where she'd been resting was vacant. I stumbled back, the world tilting. Impossible. Minutes. I'd been gone mere minutes. Where? I spun, sprinting back towards the rest stop building, shoving through the doors with frantic force. The man I'd spoken to vanished. "Hello." My voice cracked, swallowed by the echoing space. "Anyone, I need help." Only the hum of the lights replied. I bolted towards the women's washroom, ignoring the pictogram on the door, shoving it open. "Clara!" I yelled, desperation fraying my voice. "You in here." Stall after empty stall threw my panic back at me. Outside again, I circled the car, eyes scanning the asphalt, the sparse patches of desert scrub, searching for any sign, any clue. Then I saw it, a tiny snag of color caught on the edge of the passenger door handle, a small, almost insignificant scrap of yarn. My breath hitched. I knew it instantly. The soft blue wool of the sweater Clara had been wearing. The desert air turned glacial. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Not some ill-conceived prank. Something had happened. Clara was taken. My fingers, numb and trembling, fumbled for my phone. The numbers swam before my eyes as I stabbed at the screen, dialing 911. 911, what is your emergency? The voice was level, professional. My girlfriend, I choked out, air refusing to fill my lungs properly. She's gone. Missing. Rest stop. Highway 40. Maybe 50 miles east of Flagstaff. I went inside. Just minutes. Came back. She's not in the car. The dispatcher's measured calm was a jarring counterpoint to the chaos exploding within me. Sir, please take a slow, deep breath. Can you describe your girlfriend for me? I recited Clara's details. 5'6", long brown hair spilling like dark water, eyes the color of moss after rain, last seen in jeans and that blue sweater. Even as I spoke, my gaze swept the desolate parking lot, a desperate, futile hope that she might materialize from the shadows. Officers are en route to your location, the voice assured me. ETA is approximately 20 minutes. Sir, it's important you don't touch anything in or around the vehicle. We need to preserve potential evidence. Evidence? The words struck like a physical blow, knocking the air from me again. This was real. Undeniably, terrifyingly real. I began to pace the cracked asphalt, my mind a frantic storm of possibilities, each one darker than the last. Could she have left? Willingly? No. Unthinkable. We were happy, poised on the edge of everything. And her purse, her phone, both still resting on the passenger seat. Which meant... The thought fractured, too monstrous to complete. The minutes stretched, each second elongating into an agonizing eternity. Part of me clawed at the edges of consciousness, convinced this had to be a nightmare, a hallucination brewed from exhaustion and bad coffee. But the distant, rising keen of sirens sliced through the delusion. This was happening. Twin sets of flashing lights, red and blue, pulsed across the tarmac as two cruisers pulled into the lot. As the officers approached, their faces calm masks of professional duty, I felt a constriction in my chest. Voicing it again would solidify its terrible reality. You the reporting party, missing person? One officer asked, his gaze steady. I managed a jerky nod, swallowing against the tightness in my throat. My girlfriend, Clara. She was right there in the car. I went inside. When I came back, he nodded, pen poised over a small notebook. And you're certain she didn't just step out for some air? She'd have said something, I insisted, the words tumbling out. Her phone, her purse, they're still here. Something is wrong. I feel it. While the officers commenced their work, sweeping the perimeter with flashlights, speaking quietly to the few truckers stirring in their cabs, I stood numbly by. The man from earlier, gone without a trace. The hours dissolved into a disorienting haze of repeated questions, frantic calls to her family, and a dread that coiled ever tighter in my gut. As the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the eastern sky in bruised pastels, the brutal truth began to crystallize. Clara was gone. Swallowed by the desert night as completely as if she'd been a mirage. This anonymous way station, just moments ago, a forgettable pause on our map, had become the epicenter of a waking nightmare. Every shadow seemed to writhe with unseen threats, every distant headlight a potential lead, or a further descent into fear. Watching the sun climb, casting long, skeletal shadows across the now empty lot, a chilling realization settled over me. Our journey west, the intended overture to a new life, had irrevocably fractured, veering onto a terrifying new path. A search I feared might have no end. The harsh, artificial lights overhead surrendered to the soft diffusion of morning, but the darkness of that brief passage of time would linger indefinitely. In the span of buying water and washing my hands, my entire world had been inverted. The open road, once stretching before us as a symbol of limitless possibility, now unfurled like an endless, agonizing question. Where was Clara? What unseen horror had unfolded in those stolen minutes? And the most terrifying question of all, would I ever see her face again? As the formal investigation gathered momentum around me, one certainty solidified amidst the wreckage. I would not stop. I would follow this path, however dark, until I unearthed the truth. Our shared journey had taken a savage detour into the unknown, and I was now embarking on the only trip that mattered. The search for Clara, and for the answer hidden somewhere in the heart of that desolate night. Elias breached the threshold of the Athenaeum with a thrum of anticipation. Its venerable facade, etched by time and weather, hinted at forgotten histories. The stone archway above the entrance bore fractures like ancient scars. Whispers of this repository, gleaned from a dog-eared travelogue, painted it as a bastion of the arcane, hoarding texts unobtainable elsewhere. He'd arrived in the heart of the afternoon, eager to lose himself in its depths, envisioning labyrinthine shelves steeped in silence and the scent of decay. The stark terror that awaited him within those walls was utterly unforeseen. A filament of cold air coiled around him as he stepped inside. To his left lay the reception counter, momentarily unmanned. "Greetings," Elias ventured, his voice swallowed by the cavernous hush, only to rebound faintly. A rustle, dry as autumn leaves, preceded the emergence of an elderly gentleman from behind the tall desk. Spectacles magnified his eyes. His shirt hung in a constellation of wrinkles. He regarded Elias with an air of faint perturbation, as though visitors were unwelcome anomalies. When asked if assistance was required, Elias explained his simple desire to peruse the archives. A non-committal shrug accompanied the terse directions. Third level, deepest corner, narrow passage. With a nod, Elias ventured further into the edifice's core. Soaring ceilings vaulted overhead, the corridor walls punctuated by antique lamps casting a hesitant amber luminescence that stretched shadows into elongated specters across the tiled floor. His own footfalls were stark punctuations in the profound quiet. An aroma, composite of aged paper and subtle mildew, permeated the air. He reached the grand staircase, its wooden treads groaning under his weight as he ascended. His fingers traced the banister's polished curve, its surface unexpectedly frigid. The second floor unfolded into a vast reading chamber, lined with towering shelves, their spines hinting at forgotten tongues. Scattered tables and chairs stood sentinel in the emptiness, bathed in the ambient stillness, disturbed only by the almost imperceptible drone of unseen fixtures. It was then he perceived it, a susurrus, delicate as breath, just behind him. He pivoted. Nothing. a quickening pulse dismissed as a trick of acoustics or the building settling. He pressed onward, reaching the third level and navigating towards the indicated passage. The corridor stretched before him, a dim, elongated throat lit by sputtering overhead bulbs that cast the way in a murky twilight. Shelves, dense with bindings dated from centuries past, flanked him, their covers faded, peeling, whispering of neglect. The atmosphere grew thick, cloying with dust that tickled his nostrils. His pace slowed, his gaze sweeping across the titles, while a nascent disquiet began to prickle at his senses. A film of perspiration slicked his palms. His glances over his shoulder became more frequent. Another whisper brushed his left ear, sharp, sibilant, a single, unintelligible syllable. He froze, straining to hear. Seconds stretched into silence. Anticipation yielded nothing. He resumed his cautious advance, his mind fabricating explanations, drafts, vents, phantom sounds born of old wiring. Yet no windows pierced this cloistered artery. It felt hermetically sealed. Brief explorations down intersecting aisles revealed only more emptiness. He discovered a small alcove tucked away, a reading nook furnished with a worn desk, a green shaded lamp, an austere wooden chair, and a scattering of volumes on regional lore. Here, he decided, he would pause. Setting his satchel down, he withdrew his notebook, intending to record references. The lamp emitted a low, insistent buzz, the bulb crackling softly. The unease persisted, a low hum beneath his thoughts. But he strove for focus, his own respiration sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. Suddenly, a peripheral flicker snagged his attention. He looked up, eyes darting to the aisle's terminus. A swiftness, a shadow detaching itself from shadow behind a bookcase. Elias rose, compelled towards the spot, peering down the rows. Vacancy. His heart hammered against his ribs. Heat surged through him. He mopped sweat from his brow, his throat constricting. A trick of the light, he insisted silently, forcing composure. Returning to the desk, his gaze fell upon the books. Chronicles of the First Comers. Obscure rites and practices. He selected one bound in dark verdigris, its pages filled with faded sketches and terse annotations concerning local legends. As he turned a brittle page, a distinct shuffle sounded behind him, the drag of a footstep. His heart leaped. Whirling around, he saw it, a figure, standing sentinel at the corridor's far end, motionless. The poor light rendered details obscure, but its silhouette was tall, unnervingly gaunt, its limbs seemingly too long, its head canted as if in contemplation of him. Adrenaline fired through his veins, tightening his chest, making his arms tingle. He swallowed, the sound loud in his own ears. Hello. The word emerged frail, uncertain. No response. He risked a single step forward. An overhead bulb chose that instant to flicker violently. In the momentary darkness and subsequent returning gloom, the figure vanished. An icy void opened in his stomach. His breathing grew shallow, a frantic flutter. A buzzing filled his ears. He moved to where the entity had stood. The air there was palpably colder. He rubbed his arms, a tremor running through him. The sensation of being watched intensified, inescapable. Fragments of half-remembered folklore surfaced, tales of beings that mimicked human form. Protean entities whispered about in hushed tones. He'd always dismissed such notions. Now, the unease felt bone deep. He needed to collect himself. Retreating to the reading desk, Elias repacked his notebook, torn. Instinct screamed for retreat, yet a stubborn curiosity warred against it. He craved explanation, needed to know if his senses had betrayed him or if something truly lingered here. Drawing a steadying breath, he ventured down another row, his steps echoing. He walked deliberately, scanning each passage. Occasionally, faint clicks, like tiny claws on tile, seemed to trail him. Each turn revealed nothing. At the corridor's extremity, he found a door with a tarnished brass knob. It yielded with a low groan, opening into what appeared to be a neglected storeroom. Crates and boxes were stacked haphazardly against the walls. A single grimy window near the ceiling admitted minimal light. The air hung stale and damp. He stepped inside, seeking tangible evidence. No sign of human presence, but near a pile of crates, he noticed markings etched into the floorboards. Not deep, but deliberate clusters of short, shallow grooves. Then, a scraping sound from beyond the door, like fabric brushing against plaster. He extinguished his small torch, pressing his ear to the wood, listening intently. His breath hitched. His pulse drummed a frantic rhythm against his temples. Only a faint, indeterminate shuffling reached him. After a tense pause, he eased the door open a fraction. The corridor outside seemed darker, the lights dimmer, the space somehow elongated. The main staircase was no longer visible. He stepped out, glancing left, then right, and there it was again, halfway down the hall to his right, head slightly bowed, arms slack at its sides. He froze, sweat tracing cold paths down his spine, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The figure's shoulders seemed to rise and fall in a parody of respiration. He couldn't discern its eyes. A profound, visceral dread clenched his gut. His first impulse was to duck back into the storeroom, but the fear of being trapped propelled him left, towards the reading nook, towards escape. He moved with excruciating slowness, eyes locked on the static form. It didn't pursue, merely observed. A sound, like a faint, dry hiss, feathered the air. Real or imagined, he couldn't be sure. His heart pounded with such violence, it felt like static clogging his ears. As he neared the corridor's bend, the figure twitched, folding forward in a sudden, ungraceful motion. Panic seized him. He turned and ran, not a desperate sprint, but a hurried, stumbling flight. His footfall slapped against the tiles. Breath tore from his lungs in ragged gasps. Behind him, a skittering sound, sharp as claws on stone. He rounded the corner, nearly losing his footing, catching himself against a shelf. Books tumbled, the noise shattering the silence. A backward glance revealed only emptiness. Leaning against the shelf, arms weak, he steadied himself. From the direction he had fled, a whisper coiled through the air, seeming to beckon, the words indistinct. Enough. He had to leave. This transcended mere curiosity. It felt fundamentally wrong. Whatever inhabited this place, he was ill-equipped to face it. He moved towards the staircase, striving for a semblance of calm, listening acutely, each creak of the floorboards amplifying his tension. Reaching the landing, he peered down towards the main level. Relief washed over him as he spotted Mr. Thorne at the front desk, hunched over what looked like a ledger. He descended quickly, eagerness overriding caution. Approaching the desk, he saw the librarian meticulously writing with a fountain pen. The man's gaze flicked upward, annoyance resurfacing. Elias ignored it. "Is anyone else here?" he asked, his voice strained. "I saw something on the third floor." Thorne stared, brow furrowed, then offered another dismissive shrug, claiming Elias was the sole visitor. Only the two of them. Frustration tightened Elias's chest. He wanted to point to the evidence, the feeling, the presence. Instead, he stood mute, mind racing. The librarian mumbled about old pipes and the building's eccentric acoustics. Elias's hands still shook. He was slick with cold sweat. He stepped back, scanning the main floor. Everything appeared ordinary. Rows of tables, buzzing lights. Nothing amiss. He wrestled with the urge to return upstairs, a nauseating prospect. The thought of being alone again in those upper reaches was repellent. His gaze fixed on the tall entrance doors. Freedom. Yet, doubt lingered. He resolved, perhaps foolishly, on one final check, knowing inaction might haunt his sleep. Turning back to the librarian, he inquired about other sections. Thorne muttered about a restricted basement archive, technically off limits, but likely unsecured, as no one ever ventured there. A long, assessing stare, then he returned to his writing. A wave of dread washed over Elias, yet an irresistible pull drew him towards the possibility of answers below. Behind the main desk, a short passage led to a heavy door marked Staff Only. It opened without resistance onto concrete steps descending into gloom, illuminated by a single bare bulb at the bottom. The walls were rough, unpainted stone. He descended cautiously, gripping the cold iron railing. The air grew heavy, humid, smelling of earth and something vaguely metallic. Faint dripping echoed somewhere in the darkness. At the base, he found himself in a cramped space choked with shelves sagging under the weight of bound newspapers and archival boxes, stacked precariously. He navigated a narrow aisle between two towering stacks, the low ceiling forcing him to stoop. A flicker of movement in the periphery, a soft rustling. His heart hammered against his ribs. He froze, holding his breath. The rustling intensified, closer now, accompanied by a scraping sound on the concrete floor. A vast shadow slid across the wall before him, tall, its outline distorted around the head and shoulders. Sweat beaded on his temple. Nausea churned within him. His mouth felt like parchment. Attempting to retreat, his foot struck a cardboard box. It tumbled with a dull thud. He braced himself, teeth clenched, expecting an attack. Silence stretched. Then the shadow recoiled, gliding back the way it came. The scraping faded into stillness. He'd seen enough, more than enough. He turned, scrambling back up the stairs, legs unsteady, clinging to the railing. Bursting through the door onto the main floor felt like surfacing for air. Mr. Thorne was gone. The front desk stood empty. No sound indicated his presence. This absence amplified Elias's unease, but he didn't search. He made directly for the exit. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight struck his face, a stark reminder of the tension coiled within him. His shoulders ached, his jaw was sore from clenching. He glanced back at the Athenaeum, half expecting to see the figure framed in her upper window. The building remained impassive, serene, betraying nothing of the horrors potentially housed within. Calm eluded him. His hands still trembled faintly. The memory of whispers echoed internally. He walked away, putting distance between himself and the library. On the pavement, pedestrians flowed past, oblivious to his internal turmoil. He drew several deep breaths, attempting to ground himself. His heart rate gradually subsided, but his nerves remained frayed wires. He replayed the sequence, the whispers, the gaunt silhouette. The inexplicable scratches, the flickering lights, the monstrous shadow in the cellar. None of it coalesced into sense. His mind cycled through futile explanations. Exhaustion settled over him, heavy and unsettling. He paused, briefly considering returning to find Thorn, but the thought of re-entering, of potentially encountering that thing again, was paralyzing. Standing near the entrance felt like tempting fate. His watch confirmed the closing hour approached. A small mercy. He wouldn't want to be trapped inside after dark. Perhaps he would return someday, armed with more than just curiosity. But not soon. Whatever resided in that library felt ancient, dangerous, far beyond his comprehension. He turned resolutely and walked down the street. With each step, the tension in his shoulders eased fractionally. The air felt cleaner, lighter. Yet he couldn't stop glancing back, anticipating a tall, distorted shape, detaching itself from the urban scenery to follow him. It never appeared, but the memory remained, sharp and indelible. He couldn't shake the conviction that something not of this world lingered within those stone walls. Whether a product of his own strained psyche or a genuine entity, the sounds, the sights, were real enough to him, real enough to ensure his prolonged absence. The flimsy cardboard yielded, and the world tilted. What spilled onto the cheap motel desk wasn't just paper. It was poison, distilled secrets heavy enough to sink empires. My anonymous sanctuary for the night, the Meridian Inn, had just become the epicenter of a storm I hadn't known was brewing. I'd drifted into the lobby hours earlier, adrift myself after a day navigating the sterile rituals of business negotiation. The Meridian Inn stood as a monument to beige mediocrity, functional, forgettable, precisely what my frayed nerves required. Behind the counter, a receptionist radiated terminal indifference, barely glancing up from her screen as she slid a plastic keycard across the worn laminate. "Room 412, she murmured, the words as devoid of color as the walls. "Elevators are that way. Checkout's 11. A nod was sufficient acknowledgement. My luggage wheels whispered secrets to the threadbare carpet lining the fourth-floor corridor, a passage silent save for the glacial hum of distant machinery. An ice machine, perhaps, or the building's own tired respiration. Room 412 presented itself without fanfare. And there, squatting incongruously on the welcome mat, was the parcel. Small, dense, the size of a shoebox. My initial thought, something dropped, forgotten, evaporated upon closer inspection. The label bore a name not my own, Corbin Wells. A flicker of wrongness, a discordant note in the evening's bland symphony. Prudence dictated retreat, a call downstairs. Curiosity, that treacherous siren, urged otherwise. I hefted the package. Its weight was surprising, dense. Inside the room, under the flat glare of the overhead light, it sat on the desk, an uninvited guest. The return address had been savagely obliterated by thick black marker. No stamps, no franking marks. This hadn't traveled via any official channel. It bore the distinct signature of a hand delivery. Just a quick look, I rationalized. Ensure it isn't something volatile. The thought served as flimsy justification while my fingers worked at the brown paper wrapping. It peeled back to reveal plain, unadorned cardboard. No logos, no identifying marks. It could have held stationery, footwear, anything mundane. Lifting the lid, however, shattered any illusion of the ordinary. The box was crammed tight with dense strata of documents, manila folders overflowing with papers, glossy photographs nestled amongst them. My gaze snagged on the topmost sheet, a memorandum printed on imposing, official-looking letterhead. As my eyes devoured the first few lines, a chill seeped into my marrow. It spoke of contamination, of falsified assays, of fatalities suppressed. Names leaped out, titans of industry, political figures plucked directly from the evening news, and scrawled at the bottom, stark against the typed formality, a handwritten warning. Corbin, it's all here. Trust no one. Eyes are everywhere. A tremor began in my hands, spreading upward. This wasn't just trouble. It was a vortex, capable of swallowing fortunes and freedoms whole. Instinct screamed for authority, for the cleansing light of exposure. Police, journalists. But the name, Corbin Wells. They weren't looking for Elias Vance. They knew this room number 412, which meant... My heart hammered against my ribs. I lunged for the door, ramming the deadbolt home, checking the chain. A frantic scramble to the window followed. Edging the heavy curtain aside just enough to peer down, I surveyed the parking lot swimming under sickly sodium lamps. Empty vehicles dotted the asphalt. Then, stillness coalesced into menace. A dark sedan, idling silently across the asphalt river, dividing the lot from the street. A shadow, motionless, hunched behind the wheel, watching. I let the heavy drape fall back, a shroud severing me from that silent vigilance. Trapped. Escape seemed impossible, certainly not while conspicuously carrying this toxic parcel. An idea sparked, born of desperation, a frantic swap. My clothes cascaded from my suitcase into the room's cheap drawers. The dense sheaf of documents, the photographs, the damning memo, all were carefully transferred into the now empty luggage. The box itself, along with its wrapping, vanished beneath crumpled tissues and plastic water bottles in the waste bin. The zipper rasped shut, sealing the exchange just as a sharp rap echoed on the door. Housekeeping, a voice called out, muffled, somehow wrong. Nearly midnight. Housekeeping. A cold dread crystallized, sharp and piercing. Not needed, thank you. I called back, my voice tight, betraying a tremor I couldn't suppress. Trying to sleep. A beat of silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken threat. Then a heavier fist fell against the wood. Sir, mandatory linen change, hotel policy. I offered no reply this time. My eyes darted wildly, seeking an impossible egress. The window, 4 stories down. The bathroom, a closeted dead end. The knocking escalated, turning into a forceful pounding that vibrated through the doorframe. Open the door, Mr. Wells. We know you have the package. What? Wells. The name was a catalyst. Adrenaline surged, flooding my system with icy clarity. Clutching the suitcase handle like a lifeline, I threw the deadbolt back and flung the door wide open. A burly figure in a strained hotel tunic stumbled back, momentarily stunned by the suddenness of my appearance. He was large, imposing, and definitely not housekeeping. No time for finesse. I rammed past him, my shoulder jarring against his chest, and broke into a sprint down the echoing corridor. Behind me, a startled bellow, then the heavy thud of pursuing footsteps. I plunged into the concrete stairwell. The descent a chaotic clatter of my own feet and the suitcase banging against my legs, taking the steps 2, sometimes 3 at a time. I erupted into the lobby's sterile calm, the sudden velocity startling the impassive receptionist from her digital reverie. Police! The word ripped from my throat as I flew past her frozen form, unsure if she was complicit or merely stunned into inaction. Outside, the night air hit like a physical blow, sharp and cold. Keys shook violently in my hand as I fumbled with the car door, flinging the suitcase onto the passenger seat. Across the street, the dark sedan roared to life, predatory headlights slicing through the gloom as it surged forward. Rubber screamed protest as my modest rental lunged from the parking lot. The rearview mirror instantly filled with the glare of twin beams, closing fast. The highway swallowed us, my knuckles bleached white on the steering wheel, the engine whining in protest as I pushed it far beyond sensible limits. What followed was a desperate ballet through sparse late-night traffic, a frantic weave and dodge, the hunter relentlessly shadowing my every move, a mechanical predator glued implacably to my tailpipe. Only as the weary lights marking the edge of the next town bled into view did an opportunity arise. A sharp turn, wrenching the wheel, plunging the car down an unlit side street. Engine off. Lights extinguished. Silence descended, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic, painful pulse drumming in my ears. Minutes stretched, taut as wires, waiting, listening. No headlights swept the intersection. No engine noise disturbed the stillness. Escape. A shaky, ragged breath escaped my lips. But escape to where? I possessed a suitcase brimming with dynamite, hunted by faceless enemies, haunted by the ghost of Corbin Wells. Home wasn't safe. They might know Elias Vance now, too. Options narrowed, coalescing into one desperate final gamble. I drove slowly towards the distant, reassuring blue glow of the local constabulary, parked across the street, shrouded in darkness. A burner phone purchased years ago for trivial privacies now served its grim purpose. An anonymous, clipped report delivered into the ether. Then, the suitcase, heavy with its burden of secrets, was deposited like a foundling on the station's unlit steps. I melted back into the anonymous night, leaving the truth to find its own way into the light. Weeks later, the headlines screamed betrayal. Corporate malfeasance on a staggering scale, its poisonous tendrils reaching into the highest echelons of power. Indictments rained down like acid. Empires built on deceit crumbled. Elias Vance ceased to exist, replaced by a phantom identity, adrift in a different city. A man forever scanning reflections in shop windows, jumping at sudden movements, listening for footsteps that never quite arrive. Because I know they remember. The architects of that poison, the watchers in the dark sedan, the man in the ill-fitting uniform, they remember the night their intricate plan fractured. They remembered a stranger who slipped through their grasp from room 412, carrying a payload of their ruin. So, should you ever find yourself in some transient lodging, far from home, and and discover an unexpected parcel waiting silently by your door. My unsolicited advice: walk away, turn the key, lock the deadbolt, and let it lie. Some doors conceal abysses, some mysteries are best left profoundly undisturbed. The precise instant the world tilted, the moment I understood my capture within this ceaseless arc, that memory remains crystalline. No thunderclap announced it, no slow crescendo of dread, simply a switch thrown. One breath I was navigating beneath a stark, bone-white moon, hunting for an elusive turnoff. The next, awareness bloomed. The steering wheel had been held in a perpetual turn, the asphalt refusing, utterly, to straighten. Normalcy didn't bleed into nightmare. It snapped off. A flicker. Recognition of a familiar bend. Another flicker. The same gnarled oak. Its bark peeling like sunburnt skin. A cold fist clenched deep in my gut. Something was profoundly unhinged. Hours earlier, dawn had found me already on the move, propelled by corporate obligation, lukewarm coffee, and the ghost of a gas station sandwich. The car's climate control had surrendered leagues ago, leaving the humid night air to plaster my shirt to my spine. Illumination came solely from the headlamps slicing the dark and that impassive lunar eye overhead. My itinerary promised a motel by 10, a shower, then oblivion. But at 9:30, the GPS faltered, losing its celestial tethers, hallucinating roads that weren't there. A reset attempt yielded only a frozen screen. My phone, equally useless, displayed nothing but mocking silence. No service. Trusting momentum, I pressed on, seeking any landmark, any signpost. Instead, a splintered, weather-beaten plank materialized, crudely pointing towards some forgotten county route. It looked half devoured by time, yet with no alternative compass. I took the turn, hoping it coiled back towards the highway's familiar spine. What followed possessed a strange duality, events unfolding with agonizing slowness, yet compressed into an instant. The further I drove, the more profound the darkness seemed to become, the moon offering only a meager wash of light illuminating the roadside's verge. Trees clawed at the sky with branches bent at unnatural angles, their bark sloughing off in ragged strips. Leaves withered despite the season's early promise. Crickets had initially stitched the night with sound, but an unnerving quiet gradually descended, swallowing everything but the thrum of the engine, the hiss of tires on pavement. My pulse began a frantic drumming against my ribs. A chill dew formed on my brow. I found myself compulsively wiping slick palms on my trousers, the steering wheel feeling alien beneath my grip. A glance at the dashboard clock. 10:15 p.m. 45 minutes swallowed by this nameless road. Not a single dwelling, no passant headlights, no reflective markers. Only the void and the persistent lack of signal. There came a point where I commanded myself towards stillness, towards calm. Leaning forward, eyes straining through the windshield, I saw the road ahead persist in its curve to the right. Cracked asphalt, weeds erupting defiantly from fissures along the shoulder. A length of rusted fence, perhaps 10 feet long, expiring abruptly into a dense knot of skeletal brush. As I rounded the bend, my gaze snagged on it. The same distorted oak, its trunk bulging obscenely. The identical broken fence segment, the same defiant weeds. The fist in my stomach tightened anew, a jolt like current passing through me. Recognition flared, sharp and unwanted. I'd passed this tableau at least 3 times. My hand trembled on the wheel. "Pull over," a voice insisted, but momentum carried me onward, denial whispering that it was merely fatigue playing tricks. Then, the patch of road. A giant's bite clumsily filled with glaringly new tar, its shape an imperfect triangle bisected by a peculiar groove. I'd seen it minutes ago. Seeing it again sent a surge of adrenaline through me. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator, a primal urge to outrun the impossible geometry unfolding around me. My heart hammered, my neck seized, and a constant need to swallow choked me, eyes burning from the unblinking stare. Turning back occurred to me, a desperate grasp for reversal, but the road offered no quarter, narrow, flanked by a ditch on one side and a precipitous drop on the other. A 3-point turn required space, a reprieve from the curve, but the asphalt just kept winding, spiraling inward like a nautilus shell leading to nowhere. I slowed to a crawl, scanning the verges for any purchase, any flat ground. The headlamps revealed only tortured roots and grasping brush, terrain hostile to trespass. Each time the bend completed its rotation, I faced the identical stretch of guardrail, buckled violently in its center, as if from an ancient impact. My chest constricted. Breath came in ragged gasps. "This isn't real," I whispered, the words dissolving into the oppressive air. "This cannot be real." Perhaps the 5th time the triangular scar in the asphalt presented itself, I finally surrendered, easing the car onto the meager shoulder. Headlights bored into more desiccated brush, a patch of parched earth. Each heartbeat echoed in my temples. My throat felt thick, my tongue a dry rasp. Killing the engine but leaving the lights burning. I was plunged into a silence so profound it felt physical, heavy. No wind whispered, no insects chirped, only stillness. I stared into the darkness beyond the beams, searching for shape, for movement, for any explanation. Nothing. My fingers fumbled in the glove box, closing around the cool metal of a flashlight. Its switch clicked, loud in the vacuum, as my hand shook. The car door protested with a rusty groan as I pushed it open. The moment my shoes met the pavement, heat radiated upwards, astonishingly intense for the late season, clinging to my legs. The air itself felt viscous, muggy as deep summer, another discordant note in the symphony of wrongness. My sweat-soaked shirt clung miserably. Each inhalation felt labored. Taking a few steps behind the car, I swept the flashlight beam across the asphalt. Tire marks, scattered pebbles, mundane at first glance. Then, the anomaly. The tracks overlaid themselves in intricate, repeating patterns. I followed the beam's circle, tracing the rubber arcs as they curved rightward, looping back towards the front of my vehicle. My footing felt precarious on the uneven surface. My legs threatened to buckle. Moving around to the passenger side revealed more looping tracks, crossing, intersecting, forming shapes utterly alien to normal driving. A jolt went through me. These weren't random skids. They formed deliberate figures, crude sigils stamped again and again onto the road surface by my own passage. Crouching, I focused the light on the center of one pattern. My breath hitched. It looked designed. Stumbling back, my shoes skittered on loose stone, nearly sending me sprawling. My heart hammered against my ribs. 5, maybe 6 distinct iterations of this shape littered the curve, woven from the path of my tires. I clicked off the flashlight, wondering if the headlamps offered a different perspective. In their steady glow, the dark rubber arcs remained starkly visible against the paler asphalt. Wide loops flowed into sharp angles, tapering, meeting, endlessly repeating a symbol I couldn't decipher. Nausea surged. On impulse, I straightened and walked several yards away, towards a clump of weeds thrusting through a crack. Forcing my eyes wide, I scanned the entire visible curve. The same skeletal trees silhouetted against the lesser dark, branches contorted as if grown in agony. Overhead, the moon hung fixed, a cold, luminous stone, utterly indifferent. I stared at it, willing it to drift, for a cloud to offer transient mercy. It remained frozen. Goose flesh prickled my arms despite the heat. My teeth began to chatter softly. I'm stuck. Time isn't passing. Driving again. I had to try. Perhaps reversing, unwinding the path, could shatter the loop. Back in the driver's seat, engine coughing back to life, I shifted into reverse. Headlights still pierced the darkness ahead, leaving the rear view and side mirrors as my only guides into the receding black. Gently, I pressed the accelerator. The car rumbled, tires crunching over the rough surface. Tail lights painted the brush in fleeting strokes of red. My jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as the speedometer needle crept past 10 miles per hour. 10 minutes crawled by, measured only by my internal clock. Behind me, the road endlessly looped, forever bending right. The warped tree trunk swam into view in the mirror, receded, then reappeared. The broken guardrail performed the same spectral dance. It was the identical cycle, played backward. My breathing shallowed, pulse thundering in my ears. Panic pinned me, yet I fought it, forcing myself to continue the slow retreat. Then my eyes caught the fuel gauge, needle dipping below quarter full. A sickening realization. I'd been consuming fuel in this temporal eddy. Finite fuel. How much longer? My throat constricted. No, I breathed. Slowing to a halt mid-curve, I struck the steering wheel with my palm. The horn blared, a shocking, violent sound in the dead air. I flinched, scanning the darkness for any reaction. Nothing stirred. The silence absorbed the noise, leaving only the ringing in my ears. It felt terrifyingly possible. I was the last soul on Earth. Engine off again. Silence rushed back in. I sat, eyes squeezed shut, hands clamped onto the wheel, knuckles white. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. My breaths came in ragged bursts. Mind racing. A dream. Trespassing. Some unseen border crossed. Logic fractured against the rocks of impossibility. My shoulders began to shake. Sweat trickled down my temples. After a minute, the need to know propelled me out again. Opening the door, the night air felt even heavier, more suffocating. The car's headlights illuminated the familiar battered fence some 40 feet ahead. Flashlight in hand, I walked towards it, the ground feeling strangely unstable beneath my feet, as if it might shift. An animal cry, a rustle in the brush. I braced for anything, but only stillness answered. My skin tingled with a cold, hollow ache centered in my chest. Reaching the fence, I saw the rust flaking away like old blood. I touched a loose wire. It snapped brittly in my fingers. The wooden post supporting it was blackened near the base, charred. The flashlight beam probed the undergrowth below. Broken twigs, desiccated leaves. No prints, no sign of passage. Only emptiness. The silence was absolute, a pressure against my eardrums. Killing the flashlight again, I let the moonlight reclaim the scene. Twisted trees clawed at the periphery, their branches angled like accusing fingers. The fence dissolved into a black mass of foliage, its extent unknowable. Behind me, the road curved into darkness, the same inescapable arc. I felt encased, sealed within a bubble of wrongness. Turning back towards the car, my legs felt leaden. A stumble, a muttered curse as my foot caught a stone. Back inside, I cycled the ignition on and off, a futile ritual, hoping for a flicker, a change, anything. The engine sounded distressingly normal. Trapped. Utterly trapped. My phone remained inert, battery now hovering at 50%. The thought of abandoning the car, striking out on foot with the flashlight, flickered and died. An hour's drive from the main road translated to hours walking through this oppressive dark. The car, however compromised, felt like the last bastion against the suffocating emptiness. Leaving it felt like surrendering my final, fragile piece of reality. My chest rose and fell shallowly, counting backward from 10, a useless mantra. Think. Be rational. The rearview mirror reflected the road behind, bathed in the taillight's red glow, the perpetual curve. Outside the window, the moon glared, impossibly bright, still fixed in its celestial position. My breath now visibly fogged the windshield, despite the cloying warmth outside. Wiping it with my sleeve left a greasy smear. A fleeting scent teased my nostrils. Sulfur, burnt rubber, gone before I could place it. Starting the engine once more. My stomach churned, hunger gnawed, yet the thought of eating was repulsive. Trembling hands gripped the wheel. Shifting into drive, I eased forward, crawling, scanning the road edges for any deviation, any path leading out. Tires crunched over gravel, suspension groaned. Then, the asphalt smoothed, and there it was, the triangular scar, pattern reset. A strangled groan escaped my lips. Minutes later, the rusted fence slid into view on the right. Clockwork repetition. Braking, stopping. Fingers drumming a frantic rhythm on the wheel. Heavy breaths. Pounding heart. Throbbing temples. Eyes squeezed shut, then opened, fixing on the dashboard clock. The second hand. Motionless. The digital display showed the same time as before. I watched it for 15 solid seconds. Nothing. Utterly static. My mouth went dry. A tremor traced its way down my spine. A scream built in my throat, but I choked it back. Instead, I wrenched the steering wheel hard left, stomped the accelerator, an impulsive, desperate bid to vault the ditch, to cut across the unknown terrain. Tires spun, spitting gravel. The car lurched, front wheels dipping into a soft rut. Brakes slammed. The vehicle rocked violently. My head nearly cracked against the wheel. Heartbeat deafening. The car sat skewed, tilted, but not immobilized. Reverse gear, gentle pressure, easing it back onto the asphalt, back onto the inescapable curve. Frustration curdled into a sickening dread. My hands dropped from the wheel, falling limp into my lap. Sweat sheened, fingers twitching. A spreading numbness crept up my arms. My breath hitched on a sob I couldn't release. Legs jittering against the seat. My gaze drifted to the side mirror. Black trees, the moon's cold glint on the buckled guardrail. Then down, to the road surface. Tire marks everywhere, layered, interwoven, forming those bizarre, repeating sigils. They scarred the entire curve, testament to countless unwitting circles. I had to see them again, up close, confirm the impossible. Flashlight clutched tight, I stepped out onto the road one last time. Moving to the center of the lane, I leaned down, beam focused, undeniably repeating. Loops, sharp angles, circular convergences, rubber layered thick in places, blacker than the surrounding asphalt. My mouth hung slack, my legs trembled. Reaching out, I touched a darkened section. Sticky. The acrid stench of burnt rubber assaulted my nostrils. I recoiled, stomach lurching, wiping my fingers frantically on my trousers. A soft creak sounded from the darkness behind me. I spun, flashlight beam slashing through the night. Nothing. Just the still trees, their twisted limbs seeming to point, to watch. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I braced myself against the car's hood, the metal still warm. What now? Exhaustion weighed me down, body and mind frayed after more than 20 hours without real rest. The relentless curve, the crushing silence, the symbols etched by my own passage. It defied reason. Yet, here I was, living it, trapped within it. Staring at the headlights, I saw them flicker. Just once. A brief stutter. My heart leaped, then steady again. A shaky breath escaped me. Back in the driver's seat, locking the doors. A futile gesture of control against the uncontrollable. Body rigid, hands gripping the wheel, feeling the engine's low thrum. My own breathing sounded unnaturally loud in the enclosed space. The fuel gauge needle hovered perilously close to empty. Eyes burning, I rubbed them, trying to force clarity. Pressing my forehead against the cool plastic of the steering wheel, I let out a low groan. How much longer could this go on? But staying still felt like surrender, like letting the loop consume me entirely. My pulse hammered as I put the car in gear one final time, bracing for the inevitable repetition. The headlamp sliced into the familiar, haunting curve ahead, and I drove forward into the waiting darkness, the knot in my stomach a permanent resident, sweat a cold veil on my skin. Whether this road had an end, I couldn't know. I only knew I had to keep moving. It came upon me near the cusp of midnight, when the living room swam in the thin, jaundiced light spilled from the solitary street lamp beyond the window panes. Elias, that's me. I was sunk deep in the sagging embrace of an old armchair beside the cold hearth, its upholstery exhaling the faint, funereal perfume of bygone tobacco and persistent damp. My nerves, frayed wires after another day, steeped in unease, hummed beneath my skin. Silence had draped itself over the house, a palpable shroud, and the humid warmth of my own breath felt unnervingly loud in my nostrils. That's when I registered it, a fluid disturbance at the very periphery of my sight, something tenebrous sliding across the far wall. A crick in my neck protested as I pivoted, my muscles taut ropes from hours clenched against an unnamed apprehension. Nothing ought to have been there. The corner lamp stood inert. The heavy drapes were drawn fast, admitting only that weak, buttery glow from the street. No other soul breathed within these walls, yet the specter persisted, an ink stain gliding with unnatural smoothness across the bone-white plaster, like a silhouette thrown by some unseen actor, standing between the wall and a light source that simply did not exist. A shadow uncoupled from form. My ascent from the chair was glacial, knees protesting, a faint tremor singing in my fingertips. I tried to close the distance. With each footfall, the floorboards offered hushed confessions, creaks I felt resonating in the fillings of my teeth. As I drew nearer, the phenomenon receded, not vanishing cleanly, but rather liquefying into the room's dimmer geometries, flattening itself against angles and edges, as if claiming them as its natural habitat. It behaved like a startled creature, flinching from my deliberate advance, yet stubbornly refusing to dissipate. When my hand finally reached out, palm sweeping across the cool, smooth paint, it met only solid wall. Nothing. Scarcely a week had passed since this ancestral weight settled upon me. This house, bequeathed by Silas, an uncle more rumor than relation. My intention had been brief. A few nights dedicated to sifting through yellowed documents and cumbersome furniture, discerning salvageable relics before surrendering the properties to the market. This wasn't some Gothic manor, merely a low-slung bungalow sighing at a lane's dead end, in a town drowsing under a permanent layer of quietude. The sort of dwelling whose very timbers seem saturated with memories best left undisturbed. Still, time stretched before me, empty and accommodating, and a measure of discomfort seemed a small price for resolution. The Shadow's debut occurred on my third night, though whispers preceded it. Before that tangible sighting, I'd navigated subtler currents of wrongness, a persistent tang of aged lacquer laced with something ferrous hanging in the air, a peculiar dryness coating my tongue, irrespective of the rain drumming outside, the electric prickle that danced on my skin whenever I traversed the hallway bordering this living room. And then there was the looking glass, exhumed from the stagnant air of the storage closet. An oval frame, its gilt chipped away at the edges, harboring a faint nebulous swirl at its heart. It rendered my reflection subtly askew, a distortion suggesting the glass itself balked at mirroring my true face. Uncertain, I'd propped it against a corner wall, a silent, brooding question mark. The remainder of that first night found me petrified in the armchair, every sinew braced. Now and then, a peripheral ripple, a fluid darkness drifting like smoke along the far wall's expanse. Each time my head snapped towards it, the shape darted aside, melting behind bookshelves or sinking beneath the hard outline of furniture. Direct confrontation dissolved it. Rushing towards its perceived location yielded only empty space. When I dared point my flashlight's beam, the cone of light sliced through vacant air. No form, no obstruction. Yet the moment I settled back, diverting my gaze, it would re-manifest, often seeming closer than before. Sleep remained a locked door, though exhaustion hammered at its hinges. Every time my eyelids drooped, the undeniable sensation of being observed, a focused, silent scrutiny, jolted me back to raw awareness. A clammy sweat sheened my body. My heart refused its accustomed rhythm, galloping against my ribs. Finally, as dawn crept in, gray and unwelcome, I forced myself towards practicality. In the cramped kitchen, I splashed frigid water onto my face and set water to boil for coffee. The brew tasted acrid, echoing that metallic note from the air, but its heat offered a brittle clarity. Daylight, I resolved, would be my ally. I would scour the house for answers. Sunlight, thick with dancing dust motes, filtered through the grimy curtains, illuminating the tired furniture and layers of neglect. I probed dusty shelves, wrestled with sticking drawers, sifted through Silas's papery remnants. No explanation surfaced. Yet the looking glass drew my gaze again. It seemed discordant, older than the house's other appointments. Its timber frame bore incisions I'd previously missed, unsettling arabesques and glyphs like tiny scars carved into the wood. Tracing them with a fingertip, feeling the shallow, deliberate grooves, sent a fresh wave of disquiet through me. I swathed the mirror in an old bedsheet and laid it face down against the plaster. Daylight hours unfurled with deceptive calm. My mind scrabbled for explanations. The erratic sweep of headlights from a passing car, fatigue playing tricks on my vision. The thought of abandoning the house surfaced, potent and tempting. But the obligation to conclude Silas's affairs held me fast. That afternoon, seeking respite, I stretched out on the settee, cocooned by the wind's mournful dialogue with the rattling window panes, and oblivion nearly claimed me. Sundown clamped down like a vice, and the familiar tension coiled anew in my gut. I armed myself, a heavy flashlight clutched tight, an oil lantern casting a flickering circle near the entryway, my phone's weak screen a final resort. I stationed myself in the living room, throat parched, poised on the balls of my feet. Silence pulsed, thick with my own heartbeat. Then, movement, the shadow oozing from beneath the mirror's shroud, like ink bleeding through canvas. This time, its passage was bolder, tracing deliberate paths above the mantelpiece. Slowly, fluidly, it writhed upon the wall, coalescing into geometries, runic twists, patterns that shifted and reformed. It wasn't merely present, it seemed to be communicating, etching symbols meant for deciphering, though their language remained utterly alien. Again, I advanced, breath catching in short, sharp bursts. And again, proximity sent it shrinking away, dissolving into a corner's obscurity near a hulking antique cabinet. A surge of helpless frustration crested within me. A raw shout tore from my throat, echoing unnaturally in the confined space. The shadow offered no sound in return, yet the air thickened, charged, pressing against my skin. Fear, sharp and acrid, coated the back of my tongue. I stabbed the flashlight beam where it had hovered. Nothing. Just pale plaster and the faint, trembling sheen of sweat on my own upper lip. A chilling intuition bloomed then. It stalked my blind side. It favored the space just beyond my direct line of sight. I tested this, stepping back, feigning disinterest while tracking its progress from the corner of my eye. Avert my gaze, and the darkness slithered nearer, curling around door frames, flowing over shelves, maneuvering always towards my back. A swift turn sent it flinching back into the periphery. It was playing with me, a predator's testing its prey. A desperate stratagem formed, centering on the mirror. If this entity was somehow tethered to that tarnished glass, perhaps awakened by its uncovering, maybe the mirror itself held the key, a way to trap it, reveal it, or banish it. Heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I approached the shrouded object, keeping my gaze slightly averted. Kneeling, my hands trembling, I wrestled the frame upright, peeling back the sheet. Its surface remained filmed and dull, capturing the room's meager light reluctantly, as if a layer of mist clung between the silvering and the world. Behind me, a faint, dry scraping sound, like a fingernail drawn across wood. I angled the mirror towards the wall where the shadow had last lingered, hoping desperately to capture its reflection, to expose its source. My own form stared back, murky and indistinct. Then, within the glass, a tremor, a ripple of pure blackness slicing violently across the reflected space behind my silhouette. A strangled cry escaped me as I slammed the mirror face down onto the floorboards, the impact jarring the room. The shadows scattered, momentarily disrupted, fleeing towards the ceiling's dark recesses. A cold sweat filmed my skin. The lantern flame guttered, plunging the room into deeper gloom, and my stomach lurched. The sheer weight of the old house seemed to press down, its aged wood and plaster absorbing my fear like blotting paper. Flight became imperative. Grab the keys, flee into the night, never look back. But Silas's legacy, this house, the thing within, it was my burden now. What if it attached itself? What if it lurked in every reflective surface, waiting for darkness? I couldn't risk loosing this upon someone else. I stumbled outside, gulping the night air, sharp and clean, until the shaking in my legs subsided. Then, gathering frayed resolve, I plunged back into the waiting silence. Inside, the lantern was extinguished. Relighting it with unsteady hands, I found the room seemingly empty. I paced the room slowly, muttering curses that felt feeble against the oppressive quiet. The walls appeared normal, save for those almost imperceptible scratches near the ceiling. Dawn arrived not with relief, but with hollow exhaustion, a feverish thrum beneath my skin. My heart still pounded, a frantic drummer in the hollow cavity of my chest, and every muscle screamed with tension. Morning filters in once more. Sleep remains a stranger. The shrouded mirror leans against the wall, a silent, heavy presence. The method for banishing this presence eludes me entirely. It has offered no violence, no physical contact, yet I feel it leaching something vital. The simple solace of being undisturbed within my own skin. I perceive its subtle motions when I least anticipate them. A deepening of shadow along a baseboard, an aberrant flicker in the rain-streaked window pane. Departure is imminent today, yet liberation feels illusory. I suspect it will cleave to me. Even now, glancing at the dark glass of my phone to check the hour, I catch a fleeting distortion skittering behind my reflection, folding itself into impossible dimensions. A phantom weight presses between my shoulder blades, the persistent sensation of scrutiny from eyes that are not eyes. The faint scratches whisper from the ceiling, and a chill, bone-deep and permanent, settles whenever I turn away from any polished surface. I don't know its desires or the reason it clings to this forgotten house. I know only that it hasn't departed. Its marks remain etched into the plaster. The memory of its silent, watchful glide will travel with me. And the next time my reflection confronts me in a shop window or a darkened screen, I will search its edges for that sliver of darkness, coiling patiently, waiting for me to look away. My own walls, once bulwarks against the world, had begun to breathe a disquiet I never invited. Night upon night found me suspended in wakefulness, straining for whispers of the unpredictable, coiled against impacts I couldn't foresee. When I first offered the spare chamber to the digital ether, I pictured fleeting nomads, sun-dazed tourists. Never this. phantom tenancy that clung like damp air, a door perpetually sealed, betraying no passage, punctuated only by leaden footfalls echoing in the hollow hours when sleep should have claimed me. My name is Elias, an unremarkable soul inhabiting a modest two-bedroom dwelling on the town's quiet fringe, tethered to the rhythm of weekdays at the local hardware emporium. Months passed, seeking a small buffer against expenses. I listed the unused room online. Most arrivals were precisely as envisioned, shouldering backpacks or wheeling cases, pausing for a day, perhaps two, sometimes a week, then vanishing back into their own narratives. Complications were rare. Then, one afternoon as autumn bled towards winter, a figure materialized on my doorstep. Tall, crowned with close-cropped dark hair, draped in a long coat despite the mild air. A small satchel hung from his right hand. Nothing overtly alarming registered at first, save for the conspicuous absence of a name offered. He produced the rental sum in crisp banknotes, his gaze resolutely avoiding mine. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low, measured current, stating a 4-night stay. A simple nod was my reply. An inquiry about needs met a single, silent headshake. The air thickened with awkwardness. I attempted to dissipate it, mentioning the Wi-Fi credentials, the eccentricities of the front door lock. A mumbled affirmation was his only concession. I guided him to the guest quarters, compact yet adequate. A twin bed frame, a modest writing desk, a straight-backed wooden chair. Immaculate. I watched him deposit the satchel onto the desk. His eyes swept the room, a cursory inventory. Still nameless, yet I felt an odd reluctance to press. Signal, if you require anything, I offered, retreating, leaving him to acclimate. I lingered in the hallway a beat, anticipating the sounds of settling. A drawer pulled, a cough, footsteps. Only profound silence answered. Peculiar. Guests usually rustled, inquired about local eateries. Not this one. By the dinner hour, the silence persisted. No egress from the room, not a whisper from within. The door remained staunchly closed. Unwilling to seem intrusive, I refrained from knocking. I assembled a meal from leftovers in the kitchen, the glow of my phone screen my only company, my gaze drifting repeatedly to the clock, anticipating the click of a latch. It never came. Sleep called around 11. The corridor light cast a weak glow, illuminating the still-shut guest room door. He must be asleep, I reasoned. Ordinarily, it wouldn't warrant a second thought, but the utter void of sound prickled my nerves. My own bedroom lay directly opposite. Footsteps, the turn of a knob, were usually audible. Tonight, the quiet felt absolute, unnerving. Sleep, when it came, was shallow. Around 2 in the morning, a grating noise sliced through the stillness, the unmistakable drag of furniture across floorboards. It emanated from his room. Then, footfalls, heavy, deliberate, slow. The rhythm persisted for several minutes. I lay staring at the shadowed ceiling, mind scrambling for explanations. Rearranging? At this hour? A knot formed in my gut. Why push the bed, the chair? The scraping ceased as abruptly as it began. Silence rushed back in. Eventually, sleep reclaimed me, weaving unsettling dreams of my own furniture inverted, defying gravity. Dawn arrived. I rose early, compelled to check the status of that door. Still closed. No hint of the occupant. A part of me urged a knock, but a nervous pressure in my chest anchored me. I departed for work, seeking distraction in tasks. Returning in the late afternoon, I found the scene unchanged. The sealed door, the profound quiet. Curiosity gnawed, sharper now. Custom dictated checking on a guest, fresh towels, general well-being. Yet something in that unwavering silence bred caution. I settled for scrambled eggs and toast, lingering in the kitchen, hoping the aroma might lure him out. He remained unseen. The second night proved worse. Bedtime near 10, the guest room door a familiar, closed sentinel. Around 1, the dragging sounds resumed. My chest constricted. Remaining prone felt impossible. I slipped from bed, easing my own door open a fraction. The hallway swam in the dim wash of a floor-level nightlight. The scraping was louder here, punctuated by a sharp thump against the wall. My heart hammered against my ribs. I watched the impassive door, half expecting it to burst open. It held fast. The noises played out for minutes more, then ceased utterly. No footsteps followed, no further disturbance. Just silence. I waited, leaning against the doorframe, breath coming too quickly. Possibilities churned, shifting the bed for warmth. Nearer the window. A clumsy drop. A struggle to write something heavy. It felt too fraught, too secretive. Most would offer an apology for such nocturnal disruption. Morning brought a discovery. Before I could steel myself to knock, my eyes caught a small scrap of black fabric on the hallway floor. Coarse, textured, like material torn from a coat pocket. It lay directly before the guest room door, as if slipped from beneath. I stooped, retrieving it, then pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. A tremor ran through me, my mouth suddenly arid. I tapped lightly. Silence. Waited 10 seconds, knocked with more force. Still no response. "Hey," I called out, voice tight. "Everything all right in there?" Only silence answered. I tried the knob. Locked. Solid. Sweat prickled the back of my neck. This surpassed mere eccentricity. Calling a locksmith. The police. Was it warranted? He'd paid for 4 nights. This was merely the second warning. Perhaps extreme privacy was his preference. Yet, the nightly commotions. I decided to grant it one more day. If the silence persisted, I'd seek help. Work offered little escape. My thoughts orbited that locked door. My supervisor remarked on my distraction. I murmured something about a headache. Home again. The situation mirrored yesterday's. Door locked. Silence. Absolute. The fabric scrap remained untouched on the kitchen counter. I prepared dinner, senses hyper-alert to any sound from the hall, feeling like an unwilling sentry. The door remained inert. Exhaustion eventually claimed me on the sofa around 9:30, the television murmuring forgotten dialogue. Sometime past midnight, I jolted awake. Heavy footsteps overhead. Impossible. My house was a single story. It sounded like movement across the roof, or perhaps in the crawl space above, though it was barely large enough for storage, let alone a person. My heart began a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I killed the TV's drone and listened intently. The footsteps ceased. A cold resolve hardened within me. I forced myself towards my bedroom, leaving the hall light burning against the encroaching dark. Inside my room, I shut the door, and for the first time since moving in, turned the lock. An unfamiliar but necessary friction. Fully clothed, I lay atop the covers, every nerve taut, listening to the house's nocturnal sighs. Clicks, creaks, groans, but no distinct steps. Sleep eventually found me, a thin, fragile membrane. Then, rupture. The distinct sound of my own bedroom doorknob turning, the click of the lock yielding, a long, slow groan from the hinges as the door began to swing inward. My heart detonated, vaulting from stillness to frantic panic in an instant. My throat seized. Without my bedside lamp, visibility was poor, reduced to the faint ambient glow from the hallway. Inch by painstaking inch, the door opened, revealing a deepening shadow behind it. I was frozen, trapped between fight and flight, capable of neither. My hands clenched the bedsheets, a chill permeating my skin. Slow, heavy footfalls sounded on my bedroom floor. Then breathing, deep, ragged, as if pulled through grit, the sound of exertion or distress. My chest felt crushed by fear, but my eyes remained fixed on the encroaching shape. It advanced, one deliberate step at a time. Who's there? The whisper escaped, ragged and trembling. No reply, only the harsh cadence of breath. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. Every fiber screamed for action, defense, yet paralysis held me fast. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, my hand shaking violently, nearly sending it tumbling. My fingers stabbed at the screen, activating the flashlight. Its beam lanced across the room, illuminating, for a fraction of a second, a silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a coat. The figure recoiled sharply, as if startled by the sudden glare. Footsteps retreated rapidly. My bedroom door slammed shut. I lay there, heart a wild drum against my ribs, the phone's light trembling in my grasp. It had to be him, my guest. But how? How had he bypassed his locked room and then mine? My mind spun in dizzying circles. Scrambling up, I flooded the room with overhead light and lunged for the door. The hallway stood empty. The guest room door? Closed, impassive, as if untouched by the night's violation. But I heard it. A faint, final click from that direction. I tried the knob. Locked again. My skin felt clammy, my own breathing loud in the sudden quiet. Sleep was banished for the remainder of the night. I sat rigid, bathed in artificial light, eyes fixed on the door, bracing for a return that never came. Only the slow creep of dawn brought a measure of relief, thin and exhausted. Resolve hardened with the morning light. I would confront this. A locksmith, if necessary. Privacy be damned. No one would roam my home under cover of darkness without explanation. Around 7, I pounded on the guest room door, my voice intentionally firm. Hey, I need to speak with you. Now. Silence. I hammered again, louder. Nothing. I retrieved my phone and called a locksmith, vaguely explaining I was locked out of a room in my own house. He arrived within the hour, a compact, older man in a gray uniform. I offered no embellishments, just the simple fact of the inaccessible door. With deft tools, he worked the lock. A few tense minutes passed, then the mechanism yielded. The door swung inward. A knot tightened in my stomach. The room was vacant. It retained its basic shape, yet was utterly transformed. The bed shoved violently into a far corner, the desk overturned, the chair lying on its side. The dresser stood oddly marooned in the room's center. Scuff marks scarred the floorboards, testament to the heavy dragging I'd heard. On the bed lay the small satchel he'd carried, open, empty, not a single item within. My thoughts felt scrambled, overheating. Where was he? The window remained securely locked from the inside. No breach, no forced The locksmith shot me a perplexed glance. I paid his fee. He departed without probing further. I moved through the disturbed space, checking beneath the bed, behind the displaced dresser, inside the closet. Empty. The logistics defied reason. How had he vanished? I glanced down at my hands. They trembled. My heart still raced. Relief warred with profound confusion. How could he simply cease to be here? Then I noticed them. Scratch marks clustered around the closet door handle, gouges suggesting an attempt to pry it open from within. I pulled it open. Empty, save for a few skeletal hangers and a film of dust on the shelf. But the air inside was stale, thick with the faint, unpleasant odor of old sweat. A shiver traced my spine. I picked up the satchel from the bed, inverted it. Nothing emerged. Utterly bare. No identifying tags, no labels. The interior pockets were ripped. No wallet, no shred of identification. Had he intended to leave it? The lack of sense was staggering. After a few minutes of stunned survey, I carried the bag outside to the bin by the curb and discarded it. The remainder of the day passed in a state of suspended animation. I stayed home, waiting, listening for a return that never materialized. I still possess no explanation for his departure from that sealed room, nor for his spectral passage into my own locked bedroom. I summoned the locksmith again, this time for the front and back doors, replacing the hardware entirely. I secured the guest room window with nails, driven deep from the inside. I scoured every corner of the house, seeking hidden egress, finding none. No cellar exists, no accessible attic, no plausible route of escape. Though he never reappeared, the sensation of his presence lingered, an invisible stain. That night, I dragged a low chest of drawers before my bedroom door. A flashlight became my bedside companion. Sleep was scarce. Every creak of the old house jolted me awake, eyes snapping open. Time has passed since then. The guest room remains unoccupied. Yet, sometimes in the deepest hours of the night, I fancy I hear it. The scrape of furniture on wood, phantom footsteps pacing the hallway. I leap from bed, flashlight beam cut in the dark, braced for confrontation, only to find emptiness. But the memory, the turning doorknob in the gloom, the slow groan of hinges, that ragged, unseen breathing, remains indelible. I feel its phantom touch on the back of my neck when the house falls utterly quiet. Who he was, why he chose my home, remains an unnerving enigma. The mechanics of his movements, his soundless transitions, defy logic. Why he remained unseen after that first brief encounter is another unanswered question. But one truth is undeniable. Those nights irrevocably altered my perception of this house. It is no longer a sanctuary. It feels permeated by an unseen residue, the echo of a guest who arrived, but in some fundamental way, never truly left. Now, the doors remain bolted, and each night, a chair finds its place wedged firmly beneath my bedroom knob. A small, perhaps futile, defense against the potential return of those heavy, deliberate footsteps in the dark. Its genesis was innocuous, a thread of sound woven into the fabric of a mundane business call. Ms. Albright was pontificating on quarterly projections, her voice a familiar drone, when I perceived it, a susurrus beneath the surface, faint as breath on glass. I instinctively pressed the receiver closer, a futile gesture. The auditory phantom vanished as swiftly as it had materialized. That was 3 weeks past. Now, adrift in the pre-dawn stillness of my living room, 3 a.m. Bleeding through the blinds, my gaze is fixed upon the phone. Inert on the coffee table, it pulses with a latent menace, a black mirror reflecting my dread. 2 minutes ago, it began its summons. The caller, I know with chilling certainty, is the same enigma, the same impossible sequence that has stalked my waking hours. 55194. My hand trembles, a traitorous limb reaching for the device. Answering that first whisper. That was the genesis of my undoing. Seeking its source. A folly born of ignorance. How could I have foreseen this? It began with deceptive normalcy. Following the call with Albright, the whisper resurfaced during a conversation with my mother the subsequent day. Mere sonic fragments initially, unintelligible, yet undeniably present. I meticulously cleaned the phone's speaker grill, scanned for errant frequencies, even escalated the issue to my service provider. The technician, after remote diagnostics, offered placations. Likely network traffic, sir. Maybe a weak signal patch. His voice held practiced reassurance. Monitor it. Let us know if it continues. Continue it did, and it intensified. Within days, the whispers shed their ambiguity, coalescing into distinct, albeit hushed, articulations. It was then that the first tendrils of cold fear wrapped around my core, for the utterances were not random noise. They were commentary, specific, intimate observations about my cerulean weave today. It breathed during a call scheduling a dental appointment. A glacial stillness seized me. My eyes fell to the powder blue shirt I wore. The ghost of coffee lingers on the birchwood, it murmured later, while I conferred with a client. My gaze shot to the faint brown nebula staining my desk, a task postponed. Car unsecured again, it sighed during another call. Indeed, a nagging uncertainty had driven me back to the parking lot, barely an hour prior, keys jangling in my hand. Each incoming or outgoing call became an ordeal. My pulse would quicken, a frantic drumbeat anticipating that silken voice slipping between the syllables of ordinary exchange. I began chronicling every instance, desperate for a pattern, a logic. The comments seemed arbitrary at first. Attire, actions, minor lapses. But their focus sharpened, delving into more personal terrain. You still ache for her, don't you? The whisper curled into my ear during a call with my brother Leo. Only moments before, my fingers had traced the faded outline of Clara in an old photograph. Should have spent more time bedside before Father passed. The barb arrived amidst a work discussion, echoing the guilt that had shadowed my thoughts that very morning regarding my father's final days. I took to recording every call, replaying them obsessively through headphones, volume cranked, straining to isolate the phantom voice. It remained elusive, absent from the digital record, a phenomenon audible only to me. The fracture point arrived last week. Conversing with my friend Julian, the voice whispered, stark and clear. The pistol remains in the nightstand drawer, undisturbed these 10 years. The phone clattered from my grasp as if superheated. I hadn't touched the weapon since Clara's departure, hadn't consciously summoned its memory in ages. No one knew. I had confided in no soul. A soft laugh followed, dry and rasping, like autumn leaves skittering across asphalt. That precipitated the investigation into the number itself. Every call now originated from 55501. Yet dialing it yielded only a sterile, automated response. Number, not in service. I queried every major carrier. None acknowledged the number's registration. Driven by desperation, I retained a private investigator, offering a premium for expedited results. "This is irregular," he reported 2 days later, his voice tinged with professional unease. "That prefix, that exchange, it doesn't map to anything in your region. It's like the calls originate from nowhere." I ceased answering, powered down the phone. It resurrected itself. The calls persisted, the whispers elongated, growing more detailed, narrating my present actions. "Your hands are shaking again. Heart rate, 110 beats per minute. 37 hours without sleep." In a frenzy, I dismantled the phone, acquired a new device, a new number. The calls migrated. A sense of dissolution crept over me, my sanity fraying at the edges. Security cameras sprouted throughout my house, silent sentinels capturing nothing amiss. I was alone, perpetually alone, save for the whispering presence that possessed an inventory of my soul. Last night marked an escalation. Sleep remained elusive when the phone pierced the silence. The voice shed its whisper, speaking with conversational clarity. "Do you recall July 15th, 2013? It inquired. "The night you trailed Clara, after witnessing her with him. Remember the precipice you stood upon?" Nausea churned within me. That night was a buried shard of memory, confessed to none. The proximity to irrevocable action, a secret shame. "You had the pistol with you," the voice continued relentless. "Parked outside his apartment complex. 3 hours you sat, loaded it, unloaded it, loaded it once more. Ultimately, you drove away. A wise decision, wiser than your current contemplations." I severed the connection. The phone immediately rang again, and again, and again. Which brings us to this moment, ensconced in the gloom of my living room, the clock inching past 3 a.m. The phone shrills. 555 rolls 194. Tremors rack my hand as I lift it. The need to know, to comprehend the nature of this entity, its impossible omniscience, overrides all fear. "Hello." My voice is a fractured thing. The whisper returns instantly, sharper, more defined than ever. "You truly wish to know my identity?" "Yes." The word scrapes my throat like ground glass. "Consult your email." My laptop rests on the coffee table. With fumbling digits, I access my inbox. A new message resides there. Sender address and absurdity. Null. Subject line, void. I click. Inside, a video file awaits. The thumbnail displays my living room. This room, this instant. I initiate playback. The perspective is from the corner behind my seated form. I watch my digital doppelganger on the screen, phone affixed to ear. The timestamp confirms its immediacy. Live footage. Yet no camera occupies that corner. I installed the system myself. Its geography is etched in my mind. Heart hammering against my ribs, I pivot. The corner is vacant, steeped in shadow. Continue watching, the voice murmurs through the phone. On the laptop screen, my simulacrum turns, mirroring my own movement. Then, something emerges from the shadowed recess behind me. Something tall, tenebrous, an intrusion upon reality itself. I feel a distinct coolness, a phantom breath upon the nape of my neck. Remember observing Clara through her windows? The whisper asks, no longer confined to the phone, but present, intimately near. Recall the surge of power it afforded you. Now you comprehend the sensation of being watched. My limbs refuse commands, locked in paralysis. On the screen, I witness the dark figure extend a hand toward me, its fingers mere inches from my shoulder. We have observed you for so long, Elias, it breathes. Every clandestine moment, every dark ideation, every secret you believed inviolate. I feel the brush of fingers against my shoulder. Cold, impossibly cold. But we are privy to it all, are we not? We always were. And the time has come for you to join our vigil. You possess such aptitude for watching after all. You will integrate seamlessly. The hand clamps onto my shoulder. On the laptop, the figure's face swims into focus. Features coalesce, chillingly familiar. It wears my face, but the eyes are aberrations. Vacant, black pools hinting at infinite depth. A scream lodges in my throat, silent. The thing bearing my countenance leans closer, its exhalation like glacial air against my ear. Time to choose, it whispers, as on that night with Clara. Only this time, departure is not an option. The room plunges into deeper cold, profound darkness. The grip on my shoulder intensifies, an inexorable pull backward toward those empty, mirroring eyes. My phone lies abandoned on the coffee table. It begins to ring, one final time. The screen glows with the number now seared into my consciousness. 555501904. But I will not be answering. Oblivion engulfs me. When they discovered the body 3 days later, the phone was still ringing. The official report cited apparent cardiac arrest, baffled by the mask of absolute terror etched onto my features. Equally inexplicable were the thousands of logged calls from a non-existent number, and the curious video file on my laptop depicting an empty living room, time-stamped to the moment of my death. The case remains open, unsolved. But sometimes, in the deep hours of the night, phones chime unexpectedly in dwellings across the metropolis. And if one listens with sufficient attention, a whisper might be discerned on the line. It might even bear a resemblance to my voice. Just remember, should you begin to hear such whispers, resist the urge to investigate. Strive not for understanding, and whatever you do, decline the call when that number appears, because we are perpetually watching, perpetually listening, and it is profoundly lonely here in the dark. We yearn for your company. Ring, ring. Is that your phone? "2 a.m. bled across the clock face, each tick a tiny hammer blow against the silence, mocking the frantic pulse in my own chest. College tuition demanded sacrifices, hence my vigil behind the counter of this all-night eatery, the Comet Diner. I'd anticipated bleary truckers, maybe the occasional heartbroken drunk, the usual phantoms of the graveyard shift. Nothing had prepared me for the chill seeping from the corner booth, for the hushed exchange I strained to decipher, realizing with dawning horror that I was stumbling onto the jagged edge of something dark and perilous. I'm Leo, 22, navigating the labyrinth of psychology at the community college, funding the journey one lukewarm coffee at a time. The Comet is a relic, stubbornly gleaming with chrome and scarlet vinyl, its jukebox eternally trapped in a haze of forgotten disco anthems. Usually, the wee hours belong to me. Sal slinging hash in the kitchen's greasy heat, and the scattered souls seeking sanctuary from sleeplessness or sorrow. Tonight, however, the emptiness echoed, until midnight chimed, bringing them 4 men, cut from a different cloth than our regulars. Their suits whispered of money, their postures screamed attention, an invisible static crackling around them the moment they slid into the booth farthest from the counter's relative safety. Their conversation was a low, urgent murmur, instantly ceasing whenever my shadow fell near with the coffee pot. My first instinct, ignore it. Their affairs weren't mine. But time stretched thin, the diner's stale air thickened, and their voices, though still low, gained a serrated edge. Fragments snagged in my hearing, freezing the blood in my veins. "The consignment lands tomorrow night," rasped one, tall, imposing, a pale crescent moon carved below his eye. No room for errors. None. Another, younger, his agitation palpable, countered. "But if the law catches the scent, this is Major League Silas. Way beyond." "Then," Silas cut in, his voice dropping to a flat, deadly calm that promised absolute finality, "we ensure no loose threads remain." I feigned industry, polishing the already gleaming formica, pointlessly rearranging the forlorn pies under the glass dome. Inside, though, a frantic calculus began. A heist, narcotics. Whatever poison they peddled, violence felt like its inevitable shadow. Call the cops, risk being wrong, risk them knowing. Just then, the bell above the door shattered the tense quiet with its cheerful, oblivious jingle. My heart slammed against my ribs. Officer Keene stood framed in the doorway, his familiar bulk a welcome sight turned terrifying. The air in the diner solidified. In the corner booth, 4 sets of shoulders went rigid. Hands vanished beneath the tabletop. Were they reaching? Keene, blessedly unaware, ambled over, a tired smile creasing his face. "Evening, Leo. The usual brew, if you would." My nod felt jerky, my hand unsteady as I poured the dark liquid. Signal him. How? Before the thought could fully form, Silas rose, moving towards the counter with unnerving grace. "We're settled," he clipped, dropping a sheaf of bills onto the counter. "Generosity's on us tonight." His companions trailed him towards the exit. He paused, his eyes locking with mine, cold, appraising, utterly devoid of warmth. "Appreciate the coffee," he murmured, the undertone a clear, brutal command. Silence. The door sighed shut behind them. The breath I hadn't known I was holding escaped in a ragged gasp. Keen, finally sensing the dissonance, frowned. "Everything okay here, son?" And in that precise moment, a choice crystallized, sharp and unavoidable, altering the trajectory of my ordinary life. I told him everything I'd heard. What erupted next was a controlled chaos of flashing lights and clipped radio calls. More uniforms materialized, notebooks flipped open, my words meticulously recorded. Security footage scrutinized. These men, I learned, were suspected players in a formidable criminal network. My overheard fragments were potentially the key to dismantling their operation. But as the adrenaline ebbed, a chilling dread flooded the void. Silas's eyes. That look. What if they discovered I was the leak? The certainty that he wouldn't hesitate to sever any loose thread settled deep in my bones. The ensuing weeks dissolved into a fever dream of paranoia. Every elongated shadow seemed to harbor menace. Every unfamiliar face on the street felt like a harbinger. Sudden noises made me flinch. The diner's welcoming chime now sent jolts of panic through me. The police offered reassurances, promises of extra patrols, but they felt like flimsy shields against the unseen threat. The sensation of being watched became a constant, prickling companion. My fear found its shape one evening, walking home from a late library session. A black, anonymous SUV slid silently to the curb beside me. Before thought could translate to action, hands clamped onto me, dragging me into the vehicle's dark interior. The doors slammed, sealing my fate. Then, a voice from the front seat, chillingly familiar. "Should have kept your thoughts to yourself, kid." Silas. My blood iced over. This, I thought with stark clarity, might be the end of the road. The destination was a skeletal warehouse brooding on the city's frayed edge. Marched inside, under the indifferent gaze of bare bulbs, I tried desperately to imprint the details. The peeling paint, the smell of dust and decay, clinging to a sliver of hope for survival, for testimony. Silas stood before me, his expression a complex map of fury, and something akin to weary exasperation. "You just had to be the hero, didn't you? Couldn't leave well enough alone." I swallowed, forcing my voice past the tremor in my throat. "I was just scared. I didn't want trouble." He sighed, a harsh sound, dragging a hand through his dark hair. "Yeah, well, trouble found us all. The law's breathing down our necks. We need an exit strategy." Relief warred with terror. They weren't killing me. Not yet. They needed me. A desperate bargain unfolded over the next few hours. I was to return to the police, retract my statement, paint it as a foolish bid for attention, a misunderstanding born of late-night exhaustion. Their end. They'd vanish from my life. A promise as thin and brittle as old glass. Even if I complied, what guarantee did I have? But the alternative was unthinkable. As the first hints of dawn bruised the sky, they deposited me back near my apartment block. Silas's parting words were a cold brand. "Remember, we'll know. One wrong step." I walked into the precinct on legs that felt like borrowed stilts, the fabricated story looping relentlessly in my head. But facing the detective, the same one who'd patiently taken my initial statement, something inside me fractured. I couldn't betray my own fear, my own conviction. I couldn't enable them, let them weave their web of harm unchallenged. So the lie died on my lips. Instead, the truth spilled out. The abduction, the warehouse, the threats, everything. The days that followed were a maelstrom of police action. The warehouse yielded its secrets. Evidence mounted. Arrests were made. Watching the news reports, seeing Silas and his crew led away, a profound wave of relief washed through me, yet it left behind a residue, a harder, clearer understanding of the world's fragility, where mundane nights could pivot into nightmare, where small choices bore immense weight. Remarkably, I still pour coffee at the Comet Diner. The chrome still gleams. The jukebox still spins its ancient tunes. But now, the low murmurs from shadowed booths catch a different quality in my ear. I listen with sharpened senses, with a heart that understands the cost of silence and the quiet courage of speaking out. Some nights are just nights, filled with the lonely and the lost seeking caffeine and solace. But every time that bell chimes, welcoming someone new from the darkness, a part of me wonders, maybe this shift will be just another passage of quiet hours. Or maybe, just maybe, another extraordinary story is about to walk through the door.